This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 318 of the Craft Beer and Brewing podcast, and for this one, I am still here in New Mexico. This time down in Albuquerque, and talking with me today for the podcast is Dave Chichura. Dave is Director of Brewing Operations for Novo. Welcome to the podcast, Dave.
Thank you very much. And we are actually in Corrales.
Corrales, sorry.
But that's okay. We make that distinction here.
You're in the Metro Albuquerque area.
We are.
But not Albuquerque proper.
Yeah, we're in the village of Corrales.
The village of Corrales. Out down here in the desert.
Yep.
In the beautiful, beautiful country of New Mexico.
I love it here.
You've spent your career brewing across the Mountain West, everywhere from Colorado and Lyons and Longmont at Oscar Blues up to Melvin and Jackson, Wyoming. You've been out at Eddie Line and Buena Vista. And now you're down here in the metro outskirts of Albuquerque in Corrales.
Yeah. And I actually started brewing for a living in the Midwest back in 1996. So I worked for Rock Bottom Brewing Company. They opened up a new location in downtown Indianapolis, June of 1996. I remember I got my job May 8th. Of 1996, and I started like a week later, and then we opened in June. And then I worked for them at another location. They opened up a location in suburban Chicago in Warrenville, where I did a couple years, and that was my head brewer position because I was such a ripe old veteran after 2 years.
Sure.
And then I worked at had the really.
You sound like an old guy, Dave, which endears you to me because that's also my generation of getting into craft beer. Right. We're gonna trace that arc through brewing for you that that has just awards dripping off of the branches on everything from Mountain Sun, Oscar Blues, Melvin, and Eddie Line. And now the thing that I noticed is Novo here in Corrales has started winning some pretty significant medals. Also, I don't think correlation is not necessarily causation, but I think that there's some connection there. Nonetheless, through the course of this podcast, I want to talk to you about some of those things that make for these award-winning beers. That and how you've built a culture around this. How you are bringing your young brewers up that are here working for you now. But also how you've gone through your own personal journey, because as we have talked about before we started the podcast, you've been able to personally track even things like your own skills around recipe development over time, and those are not things that were necessarily as constant as some people might think. And so while you've also been working and improving your own skills, you've also been helping breweries that you've worked for make killer beer along the way and learning. We're going to talk about all of those things, but first, for years, G&D Chillers has chilled the beers you love. Partnering with 3,000 plus breweries across the country, they are proud of the cool partnerships they've built over the past 30 years. They know brewing doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, nor do they. G&D uses quality components, expert craftsmanship, and constant innovation. With 24/7 service and support, your brewery will never stop. Remote monitor your chiller for simple and fast access to all the information you need, providing you with the peace of mind your operation is running smoothly. Reach out for a quote today at gdchillers.com or call them to discuss your next project. You got a GD Chillers out here, Dave.
We do, and I can attest to their awesomeness. They're a great group of folks out there, super responsive. We actually just had an issue this very week where something bad happened that no fault of theirs, and they were very responsive when I called for help, and we eventually got things working the next
24
day.
hours. You got that chiller back up and running. That's great. That's great. And, we should say like it's 95 degrees outside right now. We are like I said, in the desert.
Yeah.
That chiller is working overtime.
It
out
is,
there.
always.
Yeah. Also, this episode is sponsored by BSG, North America's exclusive distributor of Weyermann specialty malts. For over 140 years, Weyermann Specialty Malts has been helping brewers around the world bring authentic German flavor to their brew houses. From caramel malts to the Barca line and heirloom barley varieties, Weyermann's malts are sought after and celebrated for their performance and flavor. Bring a taste of Bavaria to your brew house and explore Weyermann's complete portfolio at bsgcraftbrewing.com/Weyermann. That's WEYERMANN. And if you hear Old Orchard mentioned in the brewing community, don't be surprised. The flavored craft juice concentrate blends from Old Orchard have shipped to over 46 states. Their new brewing customers often mention discovering Old Orchard through the word-of-mouth recommendation of another brewer. To join the core of Old Orchard's brewing community, learn more at oldorchard.com/brewer. So, Dave, let's talk about the way we normally kick off this podcast. Like, let's follow this arc, and you've got a rather long and a rather varied arc through brewing. As you mentioned, you started in Indiana and then you moved out to Colorado, huh?
Right. Yeah. I was a home brewer for a couple years and started in 1994. And then after badgering somebody who would eventually be my boss at the Rock Bottom Brewery, I eventually got a position there and started my first brewing job in June of '96. Assistant brewer at the Rock Bottom in downtown Indianapolis, and then eventually was offered a head brewer position for a new location in suburban Chicago. Did that for a couple years. Parted ways with them, eventually found my way after a couple of interviews that I thought were going to go really good. I had an interview with Magic Hat and I had an interview with Sierra Nevada. I actually sat down with Ken Grossman personally interviewing me back in 1999, 2000. And had me out there and everything. And I was like, this is going well. And then got the rejection letter from that. And I ended up sending an email up to Bell's. And then Larry Bell called me and said, hey, do you want to come up for an interview? I said, for sure. And popped up there, sat down with him, had lunch, and then got a job. And so I did a year at Bell's back in the year that John Mallett came on board with them, and really helped that brewery get through a tough time. And of course, John just retired this year. He really built that place, and that guy is like a god to me.
True legend. Every conversation I have with John goes way over my head.
Yeah.
And I just try to stay and pretend that I can keep up with him.
Yeah.
As he starts talking about fan levels and everything else. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I did a year there, but
what a crazy brew system he's built at that brewery too.
Yeah. And that actually sort of informed how I would eventually look at what a brewery can be from a mechanical standpoint. How many vessels can you put into a brew house and how many turns can you make and all that. And we ended up doing something pretty amazing at Melvin, I think, to really turn a bunch of brews. And, but yeah, it was cool. But at the time that I worked there, they just had the old 15-barrel brew house, and then they had a 30-barrel brew house on the other side of the courtyard. And I was a shift brewer. I did the things, but a little bit into it, I kind of started getting bored. I came up as a pub brewer. I'd done it for 4.5 years, and I liked doing all the things, not just making wort. And so I just started looking around for a job on probrewer.com, where I've found other jobs since, and including the current one. And, I saw an ad for Mountain Sun, which I had been to one time before, a couple years before. And I went ahead and applied for that, got the job, and moved out to Colorado in 2002. 2002, yeah. And did that for a couple years.
It's so funny how like Mountain Sun is such a excellence factory, and some of the brewers that have come out of here they're just absolutely phenomenal.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Cannonball Creek Brewing Company. Parted ways with those guys, and then I was not brewing for a while, about 8 months, and then a friend of mine, Erin Glass, she told me one day, she worked for the Brewers Association. She told me that an ad was just put out on the forum that Oscar Blues was looking for a brewer, and she thought of me and said, you might want to give him a call. And I did. And I ended up getting a job at Oscar Blues in 2005 in Lyons, back in the old place. And and worked there for almost 9 years. Saw a lot of growth.
Right. That had to be a heady time there at Oscar Blues.
Yeah. It's all, I mean, it's a blur, really. I mean, considering how much time there was, it was I don't know. I don't think most people get an experience like that in their life. I mean, but that's where I really had to learn how to up my game, and as a brewer, as a manager, which is, plenty of people can attest to my management skills back then. It's all a work in progress, but it was a tough, crazy thing because I was a very driven individual, owns the place, and we had a lot of stuff, and I had a lot of gas in the tank, and I'd go there and just put everything I had into it every day. I would work for weeks on end without a day off, and just do it and do it and do it and doing all the things. I mean, it sounds like the old guy saying, yeah, I used to, walk to school uphill both ways in the snow and all that. But I literally would work every day and not give myself a day off because I was crazy, I guess. I don't know. But very driven. We had a lot of stuff to do, and I did a lot of stuff. I tell the folks I work with now, I haven't even told them this, but I used to do all the things. I would go in there in the morning. There would not be an empty fermenter. I'd have a bright tank ready to go, and I would hopefully have set myself up okay to start filtering in the morning. And I would start up this little 3-meter DE filter, start filtering a batch of beer. And then once it looked like everything was good, the pressures are looking good. Okay, I'm going to mash in now. And I would be simultaneously brewing and filtering, and then eventually empty that fermenter, clean it, sanitize it, and knock out into it later in the day. I would never even think to do that or ask anybody to do that. I did that myself. I did that to myself. I don't know. I'm crazy.
Ambitious,
I guess.
So that's the story of Oscar Blues and how that growth was possible. Because you were pushing efficiencies in that cellar and brew house that probably shouldn't have been possible at the time.
It was crazy. I think we ended up doing 17,000 barrels one year. I think. I might be conflating that with combined barrelage of our first year in Longmont. But they did 3,500 barrels a year before I got there. We did 5,000 and then 8,000. I think it was then 13,000 barrels out of that place. And if anyone's ever seen that brewery, and, it's a 3-vessel, 20 barrel, not the fastest brew house in the West. And, took 45 minutes to mash in, and it was crazy. Yeah. But I was there.
Those were the days.
I was there. Yeah. And then, then we got the Longmont facility outfitted, and that looked like a big cavernous place until a few years later. It was all full of tanks and canning equipment and, all the things. And then we built out Brevard, and I, had a part in that as well. It was nuts.
Insane. So, why'd you leave?
It got out of hand for me. I couldn't handle it anymore. I was in over my head, and I had been for a long time.
Getting older too.
There was a guy there who, I was so stupid. He threw around this term, the Peter principle, and I wasn't smart enough to pick up that he was referring to me. And that's when you rise to the level of your own incompetence, I think, is the basic thing of it. And I was like, I got as far as I could, and eventually they didn't need me there anymore, and I was completely burnt out. I mean, completely burnt out, and it was clear I needed to go on.
So what'd you do next?
Next I actually had a half-assed attempt at doing some consulting, and had one client, and that was cool, and that paid the bills for a little while. I actually moved down to Salida, Colorado, on the Arkansas River, and was living down there. doing that. And
some good mountain biking down in Salida.
It's only
Monarch Crest Trail.
But also just the trails right there in town. They've done so much. It is the most beautiful thing. I love it. I miss it immensely. I used to be able to ride out of my apartment and be on a trail in like 2 minutes, and then they've just expanded those trails so much. It's incredible.
I did that last year, and right across the river, the trails that are right there adjacent to downtown are awesome.
It's beautiful. But they ended up looking on probrewer.com, and I saw an ad for Eddie Line Brewing Company. They were a brewery in Buena Vista. That was probably the shortest stint I ever had. It was like just short of a year. Then I got a call. I did not seek out Melvin. I got a call one day. I had met Jeremy Tofty like a year or two before at the Alpha King Challenge, and that was, I think, maybe the first year that they had won. I'm not sure. But anyway, somehow he and I had exchanged phone numbers.
They did crush it. They won 2 years in a row with 2x4, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And so he sent me a text, and I was like, well, what is this about? And then he called and said, hey, we got this thing going on, blah, blah. And, would you like to come up? We're thinking about you for the head brewer position. And I said, sure. You want to have me up? I'll be happy to pop up there and see what's doing. And so they had me up there for a few days up in Jackson, and we went down to Alpine, which is the town that the brewery is in now. At the time, it was just a scraped area of field. There was nothing else there. They didn't build the place yet. And, worked out a deal and signed on with them. I started out as a consultant, but then as of, at some point it went to being full on employment, and, saw every inch of that place being built, did all the install of all the tanks and put the brew house together, helped design how the brew house was going to be, expandable in the future, all that stuff. And eventually we brewed that year, but it wasn't until I think the end of the year, like December, I think. And it was crazy. But we eventually got it done, and we were going really fast there too. There was big plans.
And that's where we met, because I was up there at the Alpine Brewery. I can't remember the year, but it was for one of the
Madness days.
Exactly.
Yeah. With the wrestling.
The wrestling was there.
I almost jumped in the ring.
For whatever reason, I thought it'd be a good idea to bring my 2 young boys with me.
Oh boy.
And camp up there.
Yeah.
And I've got some phenomenal pictures and memories of them, Yeah.
Father of the year.
Something like that.
But that was a wild ride up there.
Trial by fire, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a wild time. The beer had a great reputation, and that's where I felt I'm really proud of what I did up there, actually, because I took 3 barrel recipe beers and scaled them up to 30 barrels. It's like, here's the grain bill, here's the hops, and sometimes I had alphas and sometimes I didn't, and I felt like I was doing like forensics, man. It was weird because there'd be like 3 different recipes for the same beer. I'm like, well, which one? Which one do you want me to make? And where do you want this thing to be? And I remember early on too, there was like, hey Dave, the IPA is a little sweet. Okay, cool. Let's fix it. That's fine. Like, okay. I'm just going off the information you gave me. I see the starting gravity. I see the final gravity. I'm nailing those. If that's too sweet, then that's fine. Let's work on some mash temperatures and some grain bills and fix it and get it to where you like. But it was like, it was really interesting. I was like, it's okay, man. We can do it. All this stuff is possible. But that's where I felt like I really, helped create a place. I did it Oscar Blues too, but I felt more confident doing it at Melvin. I don't have a formal education in brewing. I just been doing it most of my life, more than half my life. At that point, it was not quite half my life, but we're there now. And that's a real challenge, like taking these beers that have now a medal winning pedigree, mm-hmm. and this kind of hype in an industry at this incredibly small scale, mm-hmm. and figuring
figuring out how to make those packaged beers.
Yeah.
Because packaged beers also need to be able to like live in a retail cooler and
survive long travel.
Survive long, right? Like deal with sometimes less than perfect conditions along the way.
Absolutely.
Work in all of these other kinds of ways.
Yeah, for sure. That place had and still has all those challenges of like they're making all this beer, but most of it's going out of state, and to have the right distribution partners to make sure that the beer is in the best condition it can be, and getting bought before it gets coated, all that stuff. It's tough because Wyoming is the least populated state in the union, and very little of that beer is sold there. It goes everywhere else, and in a really crazy market, that's really competitive. And that was the thing, like logistically up there, just bringing all the raw materials in from hither and yon, and then sending everything out. Like there were times where we could...
Hither and yon, you're so close to hop growing country. You grow barley in Wyoming, and there are maltsters that are, up in that general Wyoming, Montana area. It's not that far.
Yeah.
Come on.
Our Arturo came from Canada, but I guess it's like right up the road. But also the fact that we're in a town of 900 people in a geographic location where it's winter like half the year. I mean, and there would be times where we would have weeks would go by where no trucks would come to us to either give us stuff or take stuff away. And
sure.
Because they would get to a point where they're like, oh, I got to go up that highway and it's January, and that's not happening. And, Wyoming's not known for its great road clearing capacity in the middle of winter in towns with 4 people. It was really challenging. I remember us just packing.
Your closest major metro area is Salt Lake City.
And 4 hours away.
Yeah.
On a good day. And we were hours away from an interstate, and it was challenging to do anything, even in the best of weather there, I think, at times. But we did it. We did a lot of cool stuff there. I'm really proud of what I did. It was tough to get the place staffed. That was my main question when I started talking with the principals in that company was, who's going to work there? This is a town of 900 people. And it's at the top of this valley that doesn't have much more than that, down south. Like, where are these people coming from? And it was tough. We had to bring people from out of state. I hired people from all over the place. I hired our lab manager, worked at Maui Brewing Company, brought her in. We had other people come from just all over, Colorado and, I don't know where else. Lots of places, California, and just wherever. And then, but we hired a number of people who were already residents there as well, and did our best to make a go of it. But it was tough.
Yeah. So then you decided to come down to New Mexico.
I did. Yeah. I got to a point where I just was ready for a change. It was really tough. Living in a town that's that small. I'm not necessarily a big winter person. In fact, I will say this. I lived there for 4 years. I never once went downhill skiing. I cross-country skied on some property that I had, but I never once skied at Jackson Hole. It wasn't a big thing for me. I didn't start skiing until I was 30 years old when I moved to Colorado. Not a big thing. I was like, no, I don't need to do that. I'll probably break my leg. And so I just like, it's winter, it's tough, it's a small town. We had some issues there at Melvin that I wasn't really, proud of being associated with. And when I saw an ad for Novo Brewing, I had never heard of them before. And in Corrales, New Mexico, I had never heard of that before. Contacted them, said, hey, here's me, here's my resume and all. And they contacted me back and said, yeah, let's have you on out to Portland. So they flew me out to Portland. I spent 24 hours there, hung out in the brewery all day, the first day. And the next morning they gave me a job offer, and I said, that's great. I'll see you there, and I'll start on the 1st of January. Packed up all my stuff, which isn't a lot, into a small U-Haul trailer, and I drove on down over the course of 2 days, just me and my trailer and my cat. and popped on in, and I got into Albuquerque on the 31st of December of 2018, and I started on the 2nd of January of 2019 here at Ex Novo.
And here we are. Well, we'll now dive into how you have put your imprint on the Ex Novo beer, and the beers that Ex Novo makes, and the beers obviously that have now been starting to make waves within the craft beer industry. Before we do that, take your brewing to the next level with AccuBrew's revolutionary fermentation monitoring system, now predicting specific gravity. With AccuBrew, you'll have precise control over the fermentation process and ensure consistent, high-quality results. Their cloud-based app and compact sensor work together to monitor specific gravity, fermentation activity, clarity, and temperature. AccuBrew is CIP ready and designed to stay out of your way. Their set it and forget it solution streamlines systems and processes, confirms consistency, and helps detect problems before they ruin a batch. Join the AccuBrew community today and experience 24/7 peace of mind. Visit accubrew.io to learn more. Also, ProBrew is excited to announce that they are currently featuring short lead times between 2 and 4 weeks for their in-stock ProFill rotary can fillers. These can fillers run at speeds between 100 and 600 plus cans per minute while achieving precise and consistent filling volumes not achievable by most inline and mobile fillers. For more information, fill out their contact form on www.probrew.com or email contactus@probrew.com to learn exactly how they can take your operations to the next level. ProBrew, brew your beer. And elevate your brewing game with RMS Roller Dash Grinder. Their industry-leading mills deliver optimal grind consistency, unlocking the full potential of your grain. Say goodbye to uneven grinds and hello to exceptional flavor extraction. Brewpub or production facility, RMS has the expertise and grain handling equipment to meet your needs. Visit rmsroller-grinder.com to discover how RMS can transform your brewing experience. Unleash the full potential of your grains with RMS Roller Grinder, the trusted choice of brewers worldwide. So, Dave, let's talk about the Ex Novo generation now. This era of your career, you come into a brewery at Ex Novo where, and they got their start in Portland and Oregon, and but Joel, the founder of Ex Novo, is from New Mexico, right. And saw an opportunity to kind of bring that Ex Novo brewing love back here, to the state that he was born in, and Portland's obviously a very crowded brewing market, and New Mexico has some phenomenal brewers. I was just at La Cumbre earlier before we started this podcast. Mm-hmm. Some brewers that are like clear favorites of mine. So you walk into Ex Novo. What are the expectations, and what did you hope to achieve down here in Corrales?
Yeah, the expectation was they already had this building set up. It was still getting some like finished wiring and some other construction elements done, but it was, for all intents and purposes, here and ready to go. 10,000 square foot building. They already had all of their equipment mapped out, which is unique stuff that I'd never worked with before. We have a 5-barrel and a 20/25 barrel brew house, and they're integrated so we can pull decoctions on into the 5-barrel.
It's a very cool system.
Super
with these
cool.
Two systems adjacent and piped together so that they can work in tandem.
It's great. Yeah, it's really cool. So they had all this stuff really well planned out, between their own design ideas, and then also they consulted with some friends of theirs in the Portland brewing community, and including a longtime friend and former co-worker, although we worked at different breweries together, Van Havig out at Gigantic, I'm told helped them with some of the things that they were trying to work out. And they had this great plan together. And yeah, the idea was they wanted to get somebody to lead the production here who could make it happen, and just hit the ground running and, have a brisk pace of production to do what we can. And that's been what I've pretty much always done since I got into the production brewing.
It's true
game.
from Oscar Blues, now then to Melvin, and now at Ex Novo. You're the slice of the industry that you're an expert at now.
That's
is
apparently the thing.
Scaling quickly and being able to make large amounts of beer fast.
Yeah. And to do it, hopefully
while still winning some awards.
If that happens, great. I mean, that's never my, motivation. I mean, my main motivation as a brewer, besides, hey, I need to keep a roof over my head, and those basic things. But as far as like creating beer, making beer, I still have the thought that I had forever ago, which is like I get to make something that people enjoy, that hopefully adds some sort of value to their life. And not everybody gets to do that. And like, but and as cheesy as that might sound, I mean, that is how I feel like when it comes down to it about being a brewer, and to be able to have the opportunity to have someone trust me to make their vision a reality, like that's huge to me. Yeah. It's cool. And I'm confident enough now. I generally, I hadn't been in the past. I always have some feelings of self-doubt, but I'm confident enough to say, yeah, I can do that. Throw them at me. What do you got? And they already had a bunch of beers and award-winning beers in their own right. And, they were brewing out in Portland, and they wanted to brew some of them here, including our flagship beer, the Mass Ascension IPA. And some other brands, and then let's scale them up from 10 barrels. And so we scaled those up and started working on them. I'm not. I will tell you this: I'm not the best when it comes to like water chemistry guy. As long as I've been doing this, I'm really not the best water guy. You
were gifted in places that just had great water for most of your career.
For a lot of it, for sure. Our water here is very good. It's great. This is the first time I've ever worked in a brewery that actually we use well water. We have a well. It's about 300 feet deep. And, it's kind of hard, but it's not the worst water I've ever worked with. And so I've managed to make, really good beers in worse conditions. So we've had some things that have developed along the way as far as our water goes. We do use an RO filter, but we don't have the most scientific way of dealing with that and how much of it gets portioned into the well water. We just kind of let it fly, but we've had great success despite my shortcomings.
So to follow up on that, you are ROing a portion of your water, but not the entirety of your water.
No, not everything. It's pretty much just, we have some opportunities.
Is that due to the mechanical limitations of the systems you have, or is that built on a kind of philosophical approach to incorporating some of the untreated water into the whole beer?
Yeah, it's nothing philosophical. It's purely mechanical.
Okay.
We have some opportunities.
Thank you for being honest about that, because you could certainly wax poetic about.
Unfortunately, I don't have. I won't bullshit you. No, it's we've got some opportunities to come up with more sophisticated means of how our water is mixing. And making adjustments as needed. I think that's really where our head brewer, who's been here for almost a year and a half now, Ryan Hillsland, he's really upped our game when it comes to the water. And I applaud him for that because, I've always been intimidated by it to a degree. And, it's like one of those things like, man, I know all this other stuff. Like, I don't know how to learn. I don't know. But he's done a great job. I think which is most evidenced in our hazy IPAs. I honestly had never made a hazy IPA except for one attempt, which is the last beer I ever brewed at Melvin. Was our first pilot brew of a hazy there in Alpine, Wyoming, and I don't know how that turned out. It probably wasn't that authentic, and so we had some fits and starts with our hazy program here, and because we are always making them. We have one as a regular brand for us. The Walk the Vine is a hazy IPA that we make throughout the year, and then we do a bunch of other one-offs. Ryan really made those much more reliably good, and really made some great stuff. And he's been a huge asset.
Sure. So I want to talk to you about tackling beer design now. Because that is something, as we were walking through the brewery earlier, you mentioned that you didn't really feel confident as even a recipe developer. There are all of these skills as a brewer, from the making the things and operating, like pushing the buttons and moving the liquid from here to there and doing all the things that are involved and like working to hit those numbers. But then in addition to that, there is that creative process of envisioning how the recipe that you develop and the ingredients that you incorporate into that become this thing that you then move through this technical process. And you, as you mentioned, didn't necessarily feel comfortable doing that up until, maybe a decade ago. I want to talk about that and how, how you developed on that side of your skill set. Before we do that, you like wildly aromatic IPAs and tropical lagers. Good thing Omega designed thiolized yeast for just that reason. Thiolized yeast are a new tool for brewers to bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your malt and hops. And wait, there's more. Omega yeast makes yeast to order with a consistent 1 week lead time, ensuring peak freshness and reliability. Also, sustainability doesn't have to cost you more. Try Robert's Polypro multi-pack can handles designed for sustainability and cost savings. Grip pack rings are biodegradable and average 5 cents per unit. Craft pack carriers are recyclable and designed with 30% less plastic. Plus, you can save up to 25% on costs. Enjoy easy application with inline applicators and 24/7 support. It's easy to go green with these multi-pack handles. Visit go.robertspolypro.com/cbbpod to request free samples and start saving today. Hey, please use that link so that they know that you heard it right here on the podcast. That's go.robertspolypro.com/cbbpod. And ABS Commercial has been a full-service brewery outfitter for over 10 years. They're proud to offer brew houses, tanks, keg washers, and small parts to brewers across the country, as well as equipment for distilling, cider making, wine making, and more. They know the ins and outs of the brewing and installation process and can design the perfect setup for you, whether you're just starting out or looking to expand. Contact them today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your customized brewery needs. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. So Dave, let's talk about this. Let's talk about developing your own skill set in recipe development.
Yeah, it was a long road. Before I got my first brewing job, I had been a home brewer, and I was quite happy to just follow whatever recipe there was available. And I really didn't even start all grain brewing until just a few months before I got my first brewing job. Once I started with Rock Bottom, I learned the mechanics of the things, making the pumps work and all that stuff, putting, one thing into this tank and one in the other and carbonation and all those things, but basic mechanicals. As far as recipes though, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. We had a program that was developed by an awesome dude who you should talk to sometime, Mark Youngquist. I don't know if you know him. You should. I'll give you his contact number at some point. Mark Youngquist was the director of brewing operations at Rock Bottom at the time, and he developed a brewing recipe program and that everyone got to use. And so that's what I used, but I wasn't really understanding the mathematics of it and all. And definitely, any education that I would give myself for recipe development was based on like a lot of the books that were put out by the Association of Brewers at the time. They had like a style series, and so we'd read up on those things and percent this and blah blah blah, try to make the things, But we were kind of flying blindly, really, in a lot of ways. Despite we're hitting the gravities, but are the flavors right? I don't know. I was still, just getting into craft beer itself, over the course of the previous few years and didn't really probably have the best palate and wasn't going to be super critical of my own things at the time. But when I, and in fact, they offered me a head brewer job a year into my tenure there. And I was like, I can't do it. Like, I don't feel like I can do that. Like, I don't have the skills that are involved. Well, you've been doing it, but yeah, I don't think I can do it. And really, I think a lot of it was, I just don't feel like I could just create something without having some sort of crutch. And somehow I got through that for years. And then when I worked at Mountain Sun, I had the opportunity to do some recipes there. I still didn't know the mathematics, and really everything I did was just based off of, okay, this recipe for this gravity beer used this much malt, this. And so I would just like look at percentages and say, okay, I'm going to use this percent of caramel malt and this much, Maris Otter, and then we'll, the hops, forget about it. I mean, what the hell? It blew my mind. It really wasn't until 2009 that I finally feel like I got the educational aspect that I'd been missing to really help me with that. And that was doing the brewing and malting science course that the MBAA does in Madison, Wisconsin. So I did that back in 2009. It was a 2-week course on site back then. They do it differently now. But 2 weeks in Madison, and it ran the gamut of things. It was for all sorts of people. It wasn't just brewers who were there, people who work in the brewing industry in some capacity. But there was a very focused section of the instruction that was about recipe development and calculations and these things. And there it is, finally, And so, and I'm sure I probably missed other opportunities that were available to me at the time, that I just didn't know about, that like, oh, well, they're right here. Here are the calculations. But as soon as I did that, I finally felt like legitimate. I really felt like I was coasting for all that time before, where, yeah, I could work. I'm a hard worker. That's probably my number one asset. I will work like a dog. And, but the finesse part of it was always wanting. And so once I got that knowledge, it was like, it really opened up, the opportunities for me to develop further. And so that's what I just ran with it after that. And I just felt really confident. And I'll tell you this, it wasn't until just a few years ago. I mean, I would always handwrite. I've got logbooks full of just handwritten calculations for my recipes, for everything, handwritten. I finally, just a few years ago, just made a really simple spreadsheet with the calculations and stuff. And I'd never used like a commercial.
Yeah, Dave, they make software.
I know,
that can do those calculations.
I know,
for you.
but I made my own. But yeah, I was always proud of like, I don't use that. But anyway, it's,
and now you have to work with a team that does know those things and does want to use those tools.
Yeah, no, it's actually that simple spreadsheet that I made. That's what, we're using here in general, so I gave that to our head brewer. And so, it's all sound. It's not very sexy, but it works. And, but yeah, so but really that was 2009. That was after a long time of making beer for a living. And, and I was telling you earlier, it's like, I wish I could like teleport back in time and try the beers that I made way back then before I really knew what I was doing, and critique how horrible they were, or two, since I do have a couple copies of some old recipes around, like make one of those today and see how horrible it is. That would be a hoot. The teleportation thing would be the best, because I'd love to go there and just like, critique the hell out of my beers.
So something like Threat Level Turquoise, you won gold for it. That would have been a pre-Ryan beer. You had to have some hand in that. Talk to me about developing this beer that won GABF gold in the American Strong Ale, category.
Yeah.
Here, in the Metro Albuquerque area, Corrales, and, in particular, I don't want to get this wrong, so you don't correct me again. But you've got, like I said, other brewers like La Cumbre, Elevated, Project Dank, perennial winners. Like, you've got killer I guess they're West Coast style IPAs. They're very dry, lean, expressive, but also have a very particular, almost like, there's kind of a New Mexico character to some of these that feels different than, say, those Portland, Oregon West Coast IPAs, which maybe feels a little different than the kind of, San Diego West Coast IPAs.
Right.
For you, how do you think about some of those differences in IPA, knowing that you have made beers, in that variety of styles?
Well, I mean, you mentioned the threat level turquoise, and that was one where, it came up on the calendar. Hey, we need another West Coast IPA for whatever month it was. And yeah, we're going to do X amount of barrels of it, and it's going to get canned. And so I love to collaborate. Like, I don't want to be just dictating like everything that we do. And so I open it up to everyone who worked here in production. Like, hey, we got an IPA we got to do West Coast. I'm thinking we just go kind of old school hops, would be great, but what do you all think? And then people just started responding. This is on Slack to this hop, that hop, that one, boom, boom. And so I just used that information and, and said, okay. And also, what do you think for gravity and all that, alcohol? And so I just took it from there and just made a pretty damn simple recipe. And, I learned a lot about hop usage from my time at Melvin. Learned a hell of a lot there. And I remember actually thinking that my math was wrong when I scaled up recipes. And all of a sudden I'm looking at this like, I don't know if that's right. Am I really going to throw that much hop into 30 barrels of in the whirlpool? And sure enough, yeah, no, that's what's happening. That shit's right. And so I learned a lot with that. And so I apply just a pretty simple thing, like what percentage of IBU do I want to have in each of my hop additions? And, where do I want these to be? And of course, yes, I want to have a pretty decent whirlpool hop. And then of course we're going to dry hop the hell out of it. But yeah, I just kind of take it from there, and we tend towards.
Where did you end up on this? And now I'm curious, like if you think about hot side hops and something like this, because you want, the trend these days is to push everything into the whirlpool, but at the same time, you have to have some supporting cooked hop flavors there that kind of, build that broader spectrum of flavor to it.
Yeah.
Where do you end up around that?
I really, I got into the idea of, yes, a lot more late hopping, obviously, but you got to have some bitter in there or else you're, for a West Coast for sure.
And not just bitter, like quality of bitter, bitter itself. Like we went through that in the 20-aughts, like we had ragged bitterness that just like felt gross and overbearing and bitter.
Yep.
Like you can make a 150 IBU beer that just like, you want to like scrape your tongue after the fact.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's not what you're making these days. That's not what any brewers
By the way,
want
how do you like that beer that you just
It's
consumed?
delicious.
Yeah, it's not bad, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's pretty emblematic of like where we are. We don't want to make it so bitter and a coarse bitterness that is a challenge to drink, but it needs to be there. But we want to get a lot of flavor and as much aroma as we can, and still have this quality bitterness. How do we do it? I don't know. I just
oh, Dave. Oh, come on. There's more to it than that. So
I generally I think when I
is it hop choice? Is it hop product?
We're not doing anything fancy. Okay. Although we did start. We're just using CTZ for our early kettle edition with Mass Ascension.
But it's an early kettle edition and not a mash hop or a first hop.
No. I think that's like an 80 or 90 minute edition. We do an hour and a half boil on that. So I think we're a 90 minute edition of CTZ. We also
and a kind of lower percentage of overall hop load, or
oh yeah, it's not very much. I think I'm looking at. I think that one is at like maybe 20% of the IBU. I think we're looking at that one. But that's so CTZ plus we use some Warrior extract to just try to take some of the hops, some of the actual physical material out of there, so we can maybe have a fighting chance to get a little bit of better knockout volume. But that's what we do there. And then we do, like, I think it's a 20-minute edition of a couple hops. And then
how much of the hops going around then?
I think we're looking at like probably another like 30%, and then another addition like just before we turn the steam off, and then a boatload goes into the whirlpool.
Sure.
And then we just hope that we get a nice true pile and good separation, and don't try to knock out too fast, so we can creep that wort out of the kettle, out of the whirlpool, and get it into a fermenter.
Sure. So you have your early hops, CVZ and Warrior, extract that or flowable that you use there. Are there other hops through that hot side process that you lean on, that you find make it through?
Oh, yeah.
We've all seen the survivables info, and like everyone's paying attention to what hops have things that will actually make it through some of that kind of process. Are there some that you do use then, and some that you don't use as much because you don't find them conveying as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we use a lot of Simcoe and Centennial.
Yeah.
And a decent portion of Mosaic in this particular beer. And we use a lot of Simcoe in general for our IPA.
What do you love about Simcoe?
It's a damn good all around IPA hop. I mean, it's got all the things that you would want in it, and depending on the crop year and depending on your supplier, you're going to get various things out of it. But I mean, when you want it, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like maybe Chinook maybe used to be back in the day, with like giving you like some of that good piney stuff that you want, as well as giving you some citrus qualities and some just general great IPA character. So we dig that one. That's a big one. I'm actually heading out to Yakima in a few weeks just to do selection on our Simcoe from our supplier out there. Big hop for us. And Centennial's huge too, which I love the fact that it is still. I mean, that's a pretty damn old school hop at this point. And
a hop that maybe has changed a little bit, huh?
Maybe so. I mean, I like it a lot. I mean, I realized years ago working at Bell's, that's the
the
only player in Two Hearted Ale.
Sure.
And that's that was a big eye opener, man. Like making that beer, getting to make that beer, and that beer was a big, a huge one for me. Before I got to actually make it. And to see how simple it was. It's a really simple recipe, really simple process with it. And back in the day, that was an untold amount of dry hop. They used 1 pound per barrel.
Yeah.
1 pound per barrel. Can you imagine?
Shocking.
It was insane. And but yeah, no, it's cool though. What I love about that hop though is like, I don't know if you ever cop this yourself on it, but strawberry. Like,
yeah.
Some fucking strawberry in that, and it's just strawberry kind of goes with everything, and so if you find the right mix of some other character hops, that are in that realm, find the right proportions, it's a huge player. And it just does magical things. So you're saying
that Bell's selects their Centennial to express that strawberry character in it?
I can't speak for them, but I'm pretty sure they must be. I mean, they're like the biggest buyer of Centennial in the United States, I think.
When you're selecting Simcoe, what is that character that you look for in the same, for the Centennial that you select?
Well, the main thing is like trying to stay away from anything that's like on the diesel end, because it's amazing. I don't know if you've ever been to hop selection, but if you haven't, I highly recommend that you do it. If you can, find out, that would be a great podcast for you to do, and go do the thing. 'Cause it's remarkable the difference that you will get for a certain variety from one field to the next from the same supplier. And let alone between suppliers, because everyone's using, so many different farms and such. you just try to find the things that are like, hey, how's that fruit? Get some good fruity notes in there. You get some good pine and resin. I like to have that to a degree. Try to stay away from, like I said, the overall diesel-y stuff, the garlic, of course. Stay away from that, and just try to find something that has some character. And it's amazing when you actually do the side by side between a few lots, you can see it. And especially if you have someone else there corroborating your thoughts, that's always helpful. It's always best to have multiple people do these things. But I feel pretty confident that I can select some good hops, as a solo act. I've done it before and can do it again here. But
so you go through the hot side process here, with these hops. Let's talk about fermentation and dry hopping, specifically in the scope of West Coast IPA.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, fermentation wise for our West Coast, we're just letting everything ferment completely.
Is this just standard US ale, American ale, yeast?
Oh,
Chico,
yeast wise? Yeah, it's essentially a Chico.
Okay.
Yep. And so ferment that down. We try to hit about 2 Plato for our final gravity. And after that, we'll just do like a soft crash to like 50 degrees. And then the following day, drop some yeast out and then dry hop. We're just chucking them into the top of the tank. We did a trial with some sort of hop contraption earlier this year that didn't really seem to be helping the cause and just seemed like, not a good fit for us. And so, yeah, we're just old school, throwing them into the top of the tank. And I love that.
What was it about this? Was this like a purgeable vessel that'll, yeah.
Yeah.
We wasn't worth the trouble, or was it?
It just seemed like it wasn't doing what it was, supposed to be doing as far as like, oh yeah, you can get better contact, with the hops, use less hops. Anytime you introduce another beer transfer into your process, it is a major opportunity for things to go sideways. I really like keeping things simple if at all possible,
So you were, if I'm following, you were trying to recirc through an external vessel.
Yeah, it was like a hops. 7-barrel or 5 or 7-barrel like tank essentially that throw your hops in there. It had some sort of a V-wire, wedge wire screen situation and then you circulate beer from your tank. Just the whole process of that, having to go use your racking arm in the bottom of the tank. And then I feel like you're always going to get yeast in there. And then I get worried about just beating the yeast up and getting off flavors from that, from the impeller on the pump, it's a centrifugal pump. And the process just did not seem to go smoothly. There was clogging of hops. Pelletized hops are a real pain in the ass if they are in a tube and they get wet. And they're not moving, and then they will just solidify in there and just not move. And so, it's just not good. We tried a situation up at Melvin as well for dry hopping with a similar type of contraption. I just throw them into the top of the tank,
So, yes, but now especially if you're talking about Melvin, you're throwing a veritable, like, this is my technical term, shitload,
metric shit ton.
Metric shit ton of hops into that fermenter.
Yep.
I assume you don't just throw them in and cross your fingers and hope for the best.
No, I mean, we had a whole thing with like, we're going to CO2 rouse, blast some CO2 in there, through either the bottom of the tank or the racking arm pointed up, to try to agitate the surface, to make sure you're not just getting a flotilla of hops on the top. I mean, you have to visually look at that too, because that can happen, especially back, at times, like if you don't have some sort of rouse going, and it's probably even better to do it while you're throwing the hops in, to have some bubbling of CO2 in the tank, so that you're just kind of coaxing those hops to go into the beer as opposed to just piling up on top, because I've seen that before. It's like, oh yeah, look at all those hops on top that aren't in contact with any beer. What a waste. That's happened in the past. But it's a lot better than the alternative, which back in the day, I remember dry hopping a tank at Oscar Blues in Lyons, and the hops were such poor quality, and I was so stupid to even use them. They were so hard and had such a glassy finish to them because they were too hot when they were processed. You would throw them into the top of the dry hop port, and you would hear them hit the bottom of the tank. Plink, 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 plink. And then I remember having to extract beer from that tank. We could not empty that tank because there was so much hop. It was completely filled the drain pipe on the bottom of the tank. I had to get in there with I don't know, a drill or something to try to, I remember sticking a piece of wire or something in there and just trying to get that all out. It was just a bunch of impacted hops.
You gotta feel that these days when people are complaining about hop creep as a result of lower kilning temperatures. They're like, yeah, it wasn't so great before either. So, we'll fix this problem in its own way. Yeah. But the alternative is probably even worse.
For sure. And also, speaking about hop creep, I am so glad that is something that eventually got out into the greater brewing community, because we experienced it a long time ago before it was ever like something that I remember seeing like the BA or the MBAA or anybody broadcasting. We experienced it firsthand at Oscar Blues. We're like, what the hell is going on? Why does this beer taste weird? Why do we have this weird thing happening? We have this biotransformation issues with one of the beers, and then also, it's still fermenting. Why? What the hell is going on?
Biotransformation issues. This biotransformation is changing the flavor of my beer, and I don't like it.
It was crazy. Yeah, oh man, we made some horrible beer out of that. Yeah, and unfortunately tried to market one of them that I wasn't real happy with. But that happens. You try to make lemonade sometimes. But hop creep, yeah. And so it was really. But at the time, you're just like, well, I don't want to talk about this. We're probably doing something wrong. It's probably our fault.
Feels embarrassing, right?
Absolutely.
It must be our process.
Absolutely. And it was after, that, because we were also having some acetaldehyde issues at the time too. And that's where I learned to reach out and ask for help. There are people who can help with these things. Maybe they're going to be helpful. Maybe they're not. I mean, we brought somebody in to help us with the acetaldehyde issue, gave us some great ideas on things. Did they pan out? I don't remember them being overly, like, oh yeah, that was the silver bullet, but at least we did it. And I felt so good about it, because otherwise you're going to languish, and I think that's probably a problem that a lot of brewers have, is they don't want to ask for help. I think, we talked earlier, it's like, I was afraid to ask for help. I'm a brewer. I've been doing it for a year, 2 years. I must know what I'm doing. I didn't know anything. I didn't know shit. And, but for damn sure, I'm not going to ask for help, and back then there weren't as many resources as there are now. And we talked about that too. Is like, there are so many resources that I don't have an ego when it comes to, my beer making. I always assume that I do okay. I make good beer. I can make it consistently, that kind of stuff. I can, operate, a production facility, blah, blah, blah. But if I don't know how to do make a certain kind of beer or some certain aspect of creating one, and if I can't find the answers myself, I have no problem asking for help. And so I've been a contributor, not as much as I should be, on the MBAA, Ask the Brewmasters. And so I'll throw stuff at them. We actually have a thing now that I want to. I'm just waiting for some more data, and so I can present a good question, a good topic, and say, hey, we're experiencing this issue. Someone out there has had that same problem.
Sure.
And getting over your ego about asking for help is like the best thing you can do as a brewer, because all this shit has happened to somebody before. And luckily we work in an industry, in a craft that is super open with knowledge and information. It always has been. And that's the thing that I love the most. I mean, ever since I've been doing it and since before, it's beautiful. You know, I mean, there was a time when we were taking beer from Oscar Blues up to the Anheuser-Busch facility in Fort Collins for testing of various kinds. Once the Belgians bought them, they stopped doing that. But before that, they were doing it. That was super generous of them. And, you know, and so to do that from a macro to micro thing is incredible too. But I mean, but just among us as smaller brewers, there's a lot of information out there and people who are willing to help. And I'm among them, you know, like I'll help anybody any day. You know, I've had people call me, people who I've worked with in the past, people I met in the past. Hey, you know, you ever run into this? And I'll give them my 2 cents on it. And I do the same with them. It's great.
You mentioned early on that in the earlier days of your brewing career, you weren't a great manager. How did you get better at this? You know, and this isn't necessarily like, you know, a brewing process question, but it is something that, you know, since you started in the brewing industry, you know, there were 1,000 breweries when you started, and now there's 9,600 or something like that. I mean, this multitude of additional breweries, and what we have now in the brewing community is a lot of folks who maybe have a passion for beer and a passion for brewing, but don't necessarily have that experience in managing teams. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as things scale and grow, as they do, if you make good beer along that process and find the customers for it, often you find yourself having to then lead a team in a way that you may not have had to do before. You know, it's a different kind of position. I've been in the same position in my career in the past, having to manage a team of people rather than being just the person that does the things. And, you know, I have spent some time in counseling with HR in order to understand how I can better and more effectively do those things. This was, 15 years ago, mm-hmm. but nonetheless, like, you don't necessarily automatically come out of life as a great manager that can develop the skills of your team members and build an integrated team that can effectively work together. What are some of the things that you've learned through your career of having to now build and integrate those teams? What has made you a better manager?
Probably a lot of it is just having some humility, and I'm still not a great manager. I'm not. I'll tell you that right now. Like I have my foibles for sure, and I'm not proud of it. It's tough. It at times when you feel like this is, I have to tell yourself sometimes, it's like, hey, we're not saving lives, we're making beer. And sometimes I have a hard time realizing that. And I've been short fused and things. I've gotten a lot better about that, but I think a lot of it is definitely having some humility, and is very helpful. If that's your nature in general, great. If it's not, you got to work on it, because it's tough. I mean, I worked by myself a lot, and I'm my own worst critic. So I would talk to other people like I talk to myself, which isn't always flattering, and definitely not conducive to a good working relationship. Yeah, it's been tough. I mean, the time at Oscar Blues was really hard because we were growing so fast and so many people. I got way in over my head, but also didn't want to admit that, and the
whole company was over its head. It wasn't as if the whole company had the resources to help all of the individuals in the business grow and develop as the kind of leaders and team leaders that they needed to, along with the business. I mean, these are all things that need to grow together, right? Yeah. But when you're growing that fast,
Yeah.
it's hard to pay attention to all of these pieces
It is.
that you need to pay attention to grow effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That was really, really tough. But now I feel like I'm definitely a lot better. I think I've calmed down a bit. I've become more thoughtful. But no, like I said, I still err, there are times when you just want to say what first pops into your head, and then luckily you catch yourself and take a breath and realize we're not saving lives. As long as no one's getting hurt here, there's not really that much to get upset about, right? I don't want anyone to do, the number one thing, I just want everyone to be safe. I want them to do their work. The last time I think I, got a little, course, I think in how I spoke to somebody was because of a safety thing, because I want to make an impression on that person. Don't do that, because that will really fuck you up. And, I think that people don't realize that, and I've survived this long doing what I do without any major catastrophes. There's been things, I've got scars, I've got, things that have happened along the way, and my body's beat up and that kind of thing. But, still got all the fingies and toes and my eyeballs and all that stuff. And I want other people to do that too. So, but as far as just general management, I just try to lead by example with how I approach my work. I like a good, orderly, neat, clean work environment. I like really copious note taking. If you're doing a process and you're doing the thing, that you are taking legible notes, and I try to instill that in people. I need people to communicate if you screw something up, because you're going to. And I tell people, guess what? You're going to screw up. And guess what? I've done all that and more. I've screwed up more than you probably ever will, more than I ever hope you ever will. But you're going to screw up, but you have to fess up to it, And so I get upset when people aren't honest. I have a problem with that. So I try to, make that a thing that people know. But in general, I just try to lead by example. I'm a hard ass worker, and I hope that people see that. It's just my nature. I don't know where I got it from. I really don't know. It's just how I've always operated, no matter what I've done. But I'm thorough, and I like to keep things orderly. My home is a mess. It looks like I either just moved in, or I'm getting evicted, or I'm squatting. But I like this place to be a place of order. We have a team. We got a lot of people here. Most we've ever had. We got like a dozen people working in here, and it's all our responsibility to make this place harmonious. And so I try to exemplify that. And if I can't, then I need to find a way to make that happen. And I'm actually in the middle right now of trying to come up with a way to communicate some things that I would like to see change for the better. That doesn't seem like a didactic thing from some guy who sits in the office sometimes.
Sure. Well, let's zoom out a little bit and talk about, you're almost 30 years, maybe 30-ish years. I mean, if you really look at it decade by decade, this is your fourth decade in the brewing industry that we're into right now.
Yep.
What do you hope to achieve? What's left for you in brewing? What keeps you going day to day other than the paycheck?
Yeah.
And is there anything left that you really want to accomplish?
That's a damn good question. I think about these things. I'm 52 years old. I'll be 53 in a couple months. I don't know how many people my age are still doing what I'm doing, especially up until the last couple of years when I was actually like running like all day, like brew shifts and cellar shifts and stuff. It's like, I don't know how many 50-year-old guys are doing this kind of stuff.
I know a number of them that are going back to that.
Yeah.
Because they missed it so much. That's the trend these days.
Yeah. I actually cannot remember the last time I brewed, and I don't rue that or anything, and I'm not above brewing again. But at this point with the crew that we have, if I end up having to brew, then something really bad happened. But I still, I could do it. I could still go up there and turn out a couple turns and everything. But for me, I kind of hit the wall a couple years ago regarding the whole creative thing, and not being feeling like I'm the guy to lead this still relatively young, although established brewing concern into the future, but I felt that I had other things that I could do. And that's what I'm doing a lot of right now, is like I'm dealing with our mechanical things, even though I'm not a chiller specialist, I'm not a air compressor guy, but I can do the things in general. And if I need to call for help, I can call for help. But so I'm making sure all the mechanical things work. I'm trying to help develop some of our leadership folks in some areas to at least give them my my 2 cents on how they could possibly improve and be better leaders for their teams, and that's a good place for me to be. I haven't really thought about too much more after that. I hope my legs still work for the next 20 years or so, and I can still bebop around, and my eyesight doesn't give out on me, and I can hopefully get better at some things. I would like to get better with the mechanical stuff. I still feel like breweries, I mean, this is what I've done, and I'm most comfortable. I spend more of my time in my workplace than I do at home usually. And I don't regret that either. I mean, it's like I said, it's one of those things. We get to do something that the end product is something that people enjoy. And that's a huge motivator for me. I don't know what else I would do. So as long as I'm in here somewhere, but it seems like a lot of old brewers turn to doing sales or something, but I don't think I have the personality for that, but we'll see. Maybe I'll all of a sudden be the most gregarious person in the world.
We'll see if brand ambassador is in your future, but in the meantime, keeping this brewing ship running seems like it's enough to keep you busy.
It's gratifying, and I like watching people develop, and and we have a lot of good people here, and and I hope that they all see the opportunity, and that's what I tell people is like, you're the future of this place. I'm not. I'm going to be dead at some point, like you guys are the future of this place, and there's so much opportunity. And so I actually made this box that is eventually going to be adorned with some sort of a thing to just like ask Dave or something like that. And it's just going to be something just to try to open up some communication and of like, hey, if you're afraid to talk to me for some reason because I'm some kind of an asshole, or don't want to message me or about something, or you feel shy about something, throw it in the box anonymously, and it could be anything. Like, what do you know about this? What's the deal with that chiller? What's the deal with the auger? Or whatever it might be. And so just try to see, like, I've got a lot of experience with some things. I don't want to be some guy just like, okay, cool, I'm going to do a Dave raconteur hour or something like that. But maybe if we can get people to not put things, just, crass things into the box, that would be great. But I'm sure that'll happen too, but that's okay.
It's humanity. Someone's always going to put something awful in there.
Of course.
Well, Dave, we've been talking for a while now. I could continue to, probe into the depths of your brewing history for much longer, but I think it's probably time to have another beer instead. So let's bring this to a close. G&D Chillers to set the standard on quality, service, and reliability with 24/7 service and support. BSG is North America's exclusive distributor of Vireman specialty malts. Try Old Orchard's flavored craft juice concentrate blends in your next craft beverage. AccuBrew gives you unprecedented insight into the fermentation process. ProBrew's rotary can fillers can take your packaging to the next level. RMS roller grinder mills unlock the full potential of your grain. Omega stylized yeasts bring intense guava and passion fruit aromas out of your molten hops. Go green with multi-pack candles from Roberts Polypro. and ABS Commercial is your full-service brewery outfitter. Of course, if you enjoyed this episode and any others, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button, become a subscriber to the magazine, both of our magazines for that matter, Craft Beer and Brewing magazine, as well as the Brewing Industry Guide magazine, depending on where you fall on that pro spectrum. We've got media products for all of you, and that support is the thing that makes a difference for us. Dave, if people want to learn more about Ex Novo, where can they learn more?
Well, we're on all of the social things. If you put in xnovobrew.com, you will find us. And we're on the Instas and the Facebooks and the whatever the other thing's called, I think. No, we're not on the other thing. And and then we're just right down here in the beautiful little village of Corrales, just outside of Albuquerque. It's a cool little spot, all kinds of cool things happening. It's like a farming community. There's dirt roads and horses and vineyards, and there's another brewery right down the street, and there's some good restaurants, and it's a really, really great place. And we have
mountain bike trails not too far away that I am going to experience myself tomorrow morning.
I will be there with you if you are so inclined.
Oh, hell yeah.
I would love to show you around. It's a fantastic community here, and we have this beautiful beer garden, which is in constant development. It's been we opened it just I think a couple years ago, and it just keeps getting better and better every year, and the trees are growing and the grass is growing.
It's quite a compound, an Ex Novo compound down here. Yeah. Well, Dave, thanks for joining me for the podcast. It's been fun to catch up. It's been fun to like retrace our own experiences through history here. It was almost 10 years since I last, maybe 9 years since I last, since we met.
Holy moly.
I know, right? Where did the years go?
I don't know.
And here we are in different contexts and different place, but you're still making fantastic beer. Thanks for joining me and talking to me on the podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And a baba booey to you all.
Cheers.
Thanks.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.